Mike McCool here. I'm in the Royal Examiner studio, and with me today is former town manager Michael Graham. There's a lot of talk going around the community about our new hiring of a new town manager. The first group that went around didn't do too good. We had 47 applicants. They narrowed it down, and the council decided, well, none of those were any good. And now they have 42 applicants in the second round. And so we're hoping. So I thought we'd bring Michael in. He's a former town manager. He's gone through this interview process before. He knows what it's like, and he knows what we really need for a good town manager. So, Mike, what say you?
Well, I mean, that was there's a book that says these are the best of times, these are the worst of times. And I would have to say that my experience with being a town manager coming out of the corporate environment was pretty much, that's a good description of what we were talking about, the best of times, the worst of times. The process itself is probably one of the most unusual processes I had ever been in my corporate world. I had told somebody about a couple of years ago when I went through this process, I said, I have run multi-billion-dollar companies, and I've never been as scrubbed and checked out and any other job other than this town manager's job.
Right.
We even had one of the councilmen wanted to go back and look at after 50 years of being out of school, well, 40 years of being out of school, I had a councilman that wanted to go back and look at my transcripts from JMU. I mean, that's how much they were digging. And I guess they found out that I was a good student. So
you actually went to school.
Yeah, I actually went to school, and I didn't pay anybody to hide my records or anything. So no, it turned out, I guess, acceptable. But that process was probably one of the most unique processes I've ever been in, really. I can go into it a little bit if you'd like.
Kind of start at the beginning, like when you applied for the job. I mean, kind of take us from the very beginning, because what motivates people then to even want this job?
Well, I was in a little different situation. I had just sold a company. Whenever you sell companies, you have a couple years. Yeah, but I mean, you have a golden parachute. So I couldn't do anything for 3-4 years. And I was just at a stage in life. My dad was quit coming to visit me in Atlanta. He was healthy, but I knew.
And he lived in Front Royal.
And he lived in Front Royal, and so I guess I don't know. It was probably late mid life crisis, I guess we would call it. And I said, well, look, you know what? I don't want to do what I'm doing anymore. I just want to do something different. So I had a couple years to figure out what I wanted to do, and that's when the phone call came in from then Councilman Mr. Brooks, Stan Brooks. And for many, many years, he had guilted me on coming back to Front Royal and giving back to what Front Royal gave to me as I was growing up, that I needed to give back to the community.
Right. You couldn't wait to leave, right?
No, yeah, I couldn't wait to leave and get out of here, and I thought I'd never come back again. And so he says, no, Mike, when are you going to come back and do something good? And he called me a greedy capitalist. And I said, well, thank you very much. And I said, well, let me consider it. And then the opportunity popped up. I guess at that time, I didn't really know it, but apparently the Front Royal had 5 town managers, mixtures of permanents and temporaries, 5 and 5 years. So going into an environment like that, well, I wouldn't say it was the most conducive for success. And I was thinking, man, this is just like a company that's been floundering for years and years, and it would take a lot of work to get through that particular situation and turn around the culture of the company or the community in this case. And I said, well, I got a couple years. I've never done it before, so I said, okay, let's give it a whirl. How hard could it be? Right. Coming off running a multi-billion-dollar company versus a $50 or $60 million budget. And I said, well, this would be a piece of cake. So that's when the process started. So then I got a call from the headhunter, which the town had hired, and this is such a wild shot. I mean, I was like, my wife was like going, "Are you kidding me? Are you really thinking about that?" I said, "Look, I'll go for the interview just to keep me sharp, and I'll see what happens." So about 2.5 hours later, these people are like going, "Wow, you would be really good for this. This is what this community needs, is someone who has a business background, had success, grew up there, knows know the lay of the land. And so we'd like to move you on." And I go, "Well, okay." I said, "How many people are there?" And they go, "Oh, about 62. And I go, 62 people? I'm like the least qualify for something like this. And they said, well, what would be your biggest challenge? And I said, well, with all due respect to today's politicians, I do not like politicians at all. And in this particular case, I don't think I'm going to like the people who are in power right now. So I don't see any way that they would ever go along with putting me in there, because I would be one that would question them on a lot of their motives. And because, I was financially secure, I couldn't be bought. I mean, I would do it for the right reasons. And I said, no way they'll want me. So that started the process. So pretty soon I was brought up for an interview.
You'd moved from 62 up the list.
Well, yeah, at least I made the first cut of maybe the first 35, right?
Right.
And I don't really know exactly how many came in before me, but I made it to an in-face interview with the council. And so, I flew up, and, it was great hanging out with Dad, and it was kind of fun. I'm sitting in this council, with, I think with Jim Eason was the mayor at the time. He was really my go-to person. He was really the one that was pursuing me the most out of all this. And, the questions were basic stuff about basic management. Now, what was interesting was, they had a pretty good handle, that particular council at the time had a pretty good handle on what was going on in the town. They were much more engaged and involved than I think in some previous ones. But they had an idea of like they were in trouble and they needed to get somebody here that can actually make some things happen. So I went through the first process, and then there was a big groundswell of people in the community that wanted to make sure they were getting the right person, kind of like what's kind of happening now. And what they did was they kind of created this called Blue Ribbon Committee of outstanding Front Royal citizens that would interview me, because the council wanted more support in this.
They didn't want to be accused of making the wrong decision. And
I
maybe
guess. And
spread that blame out.
we don't want to take all the heat on this one if it was a bad decision. And so they asked me to come up again, because apparently I had made it into the top 10. Okay, so I think they had 10 of us that were coming up, and it was really strange because I'd pass them in the hallway.
Right.
Oh, how are you? Where'd you come from? I go, corporate, and then you could see them all like, oh my God, he's not one of us. So these are the candidates. So anyway, it's very nice. It was very pleasant. So anyway, I walk into this room, and there were like 12 or 15 of the citizens that I grew up with. I mean, they were kind of had some maturity when I was a teenager when I left, and they were still there. We had probably 3 or 4 mayors, Bob Traster, John Marlowe. We had he used to run the plant out here at La Barca. We had an older lady, which was an attorney. I'll remember her name in a second. That was out there. We had the HR director from the county. I mean, it was the who's who of the town that would sit there and start peppering me with a lot of questions. And most of the questions were very good business questions. I mean, like, how'd you do this? How you run? How big are budgets? How are you comfortable with, having multiple departments? And I said, yeah. I mean, and I gave them some examples. And then one of them asked me, like, well, are you familiar with electricity? And I said, well, I mean, I don't know how familiar you want to be with it. I know not to touch it.
I know how a light switch works.
Yeah, I said I was the biggest buyer of power in the state of Illinois, because I had some very large facilities out there that I used to negotiate contracts with them, and with the power companies themselves for how much usage, and that seemed to satisfy them. So the interview went well, and I mean, we had a great time, and I had no feeling about this. This was pretty much like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I could care less. It'd be nice to come up here, hang out with my dad, and take care of him, and have some time. So anyway, that interview went very well, and I left, and I thought that's the last time I'd hear from anybody. Then all of a sudden, I got called back again for the main council. No, excuse me. Let me back up. I got called back in again for one more interview with the Blue Ribbon Committee. Then I was called back for the council. Now I was down to the top 3. There was 3 of us. There was a gentleman from Natural Bridge, I think it is, and there was another gentleman down in Tennessee, and myself. And the whole time my wife is like going, "You got to be kidding me, right? You're not, not." I said, "Well, honey, let's see where this thing goes. This is kind of fun. I'm enjoying this because I'm learning a lot." See, I had no idea. And so I go for the next meeting, and then all of a sudden, the other candidates kind of dropped out for various reasons, or eliminated themselves on that, and so I was there. And they said, "Well, Mike, we would really like you to become, the town manager." And I said, at the time I was going to like a 3-week cruise in the Mediterranean, and I said, "Well, I'll give you my word when I get back after we get back from vacation." And and I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of business partners and everything. It was a very highly considered decision on my part. It wasn't just flipping. I thought that at my age and my experience that I could truly do quite well and help the community. Now, I was also extremely naive, Mike. But the naivety came from not being in public service at all. I had no idea what the expectation is. In fact, my expectation was that being a public servant was probably one of the greatest things in life you could do, because you did it because you wanted to help people, not because you made a lot of money. So in some ways, Stan was right. I thought that a public servant was about as pure as snow, and that your reasons for doing this was absolutely one of the best. And and once I got there, I saw a lot of the people that worked there, the people on the electric lines, the water guys, the sewer guys, the paving guys. These people were like, man, just out there in the worst conditions. Freezing weather, down in a hole, and everything's freezing as it comes out. Winds blowing while they're trying to fix electrical line. It was really quite remarkable. And even the police department, I learned so much about the police department, about how tough a job that is. Policing is terribly hard. It's probably the highest divorce rate in the country of any occupation. So here, all of a sudden, I see all these things, and I'm thinking, my goodness, these people are all saints. They really are. And that was confirmed to me watching the people work. And then, of course, I entered into the political side of the situation. And then that all changed my whole opinion on the whole thing after that, because I realized that most of the people, as Tom Robinette once told me when I was very upset with some of the activities of some of the councilmen, he says, "Mike, why do you think these people are smart?" He said, "All they did was win a popularity contest." And it hit me then. I said, "Well, you're pretty much right, because most of them come in not with a huge background of how this community works, which is really one of the most complicated jobs I've ever had in my entire life, because when I was running a big corporation, I had a lot of people who I could, who were experts.
Do
that, and you could have a lot of scale. You could have here, you had between the regular public works side, which is, I don't know whether you've ever built a road, but there's a lot more to building roads than I ever thought that went into it, right? Yeah, it's a lot more. And then you got your electricity, which is, Front Royal was in a great location. They had a monopoly on their power distribution. And then you had your water and you had your sewer, and the water itself is a huge problem, how to manage your water resources. And it's been virtually no focus on any of this when I got here. And so it was, it took every bit, and then you had that basic, all that work, and then you had to deal with the political side of decisions being made, not necessarily for the right reason, but more for more self-serving type of reasons. And some of the logic on the debates were just absolutely foreign to me, how they could debate these certain things. So between just the job itself of managing really about 5 different companies, which is the water, power, sewer, trash, and the town, in addition to managing the political aspect of it, it was probably one of the most demanding jobs or anything. I have great respect for city and town managers and administrators who have longevity in these particular jobs. It takes a lot of skill. I made it 4 years. I couldn't have done any more than that. Because the political climate was getting so divisive, and so I really have quite great admiration for all the public servant people that serve our community, and they do it. They don't make a lot. They make good livings, but they don't get rich, and they sacrifice a lot for the quality of life in our community. And so I try not to say anything negative about anybody who takes that position of a manager like this, because it is a heck of a job. And you really, if you ask me if I have to do it over again, I would probably say, knowing what I know now, what I got from it, yes, I'd do it all over again, because what happened to me, which makes this so valuable, and this is why when people say, why do you still live in Front Royal, and the way people treated you and all this other stuff, I said, man, that makes no difference. What I learned during that process was there's a couple things that are happening. Number one, the revenue system in our community is antiquated, because the way we drive our community is through economic growth. If you do not have economic growth, then you are really in bad shape, because you can't generate enough revenues through increasing residential taxes in order to cover the operational cost and do the capital improvements on the infrastructure that you need. So, man, if you do not have, if you do not have economic growth, then your community is going to face some real challenges. And the other challenge is, of course, is the availability of water, which nobody seems to think about.
They think it's an unlimited supply.
They'd say as long as the river is flowing, we got water, but that's not the case.
They don't realize how many people are sucking water out of that river.
Upstream.
Upstream.
Upstream,
That's
not just us, but upstream.
Upstream, exactly.
And then they're putting it back too, and it's not coming in. It doesn't come in as quite the same quality level that it was taken out. So that old saying's that when I traveled to Mexico once, and my wife and I were traveling to the pyramids, and if you've ever been down there, there's the way to get there. You have to go through one of the worst slums in the world, and all these shacks are stacked up on mountains, right? And the driver turned around trying to be clever and says, you know what the definition of depression is? And I said, no, it says when somebody moves above you.
Yes.
Yes. So I mean, there are some tremendous challenges. And like I said, whoever they pick for the next town manager, my recommendation would be is pick somebody with some that has. I mean, I'm okay for young people. I mean, young people are great. They have a different thought process.
Got energy.
They got energy. They're thinking differently. The problem that they will have with somebody younger is some of the more mature councilmen will not want to deviate for what they've always done. And what happens is there will be a clash. Now, what made it unique for me for at least the first 2 years while the council who brought me in, we worked so well together, because remember, my wife said, you really had great timing. You walked into the worst recession above what's happening now in the history since 1930. So here we are in the 2006 to 10 recession, and I'm sitting here with this big, enterprise here that has had 5 leadership positions in 5 years. The morale was terrible. I mean, it was probably just like me walking into a failing company and saying, okay, I'm going to turn this around in 60 or 90 days. Now, I realized I could not do it in a community. It would take at least 3 years for me to start, because of the processes are much slower than me being able to just come in and do what I normally do with a company. So with that, I mean, I entered the worst possible scenario, and I will always remember, and I had the councilmen that brought me in were very good. There was Brooks, there was Esom, there was Tim Darr, there was Tom Sayer, there was Brett Herback. I mean, so these are pretty solid people that gave me the leadway, because they said, Mike, we need new ideas. We want you to take charge of this and do some of the things you think need to be done here, and we're not going to get in your way. And that's when we went into the massive redoing of Front Royal. That's when the baskets came out. We paved the roads on Main. When I got here, Main Street, you had like 25 potholes just going down Main Street, and this is supposed to be our gym. And so we paved. We did all this stuff right in the middle of the recession. I found money that had been tucked away for 20 years for curb and guttering that they just never used. So we pulled that out, and so they allowed me to actually, do construction and beautify the town. The street signs came up. If you notice the street sign, the beautification of 55 coming in. I took out 13 refrigerators from that little area that people would go up to the hill and just push it down. So we actually did a lot of stuff, and we were actually got into the green side of it also, because we won the first prize at the VML of the green community for 15,000 and under community. So we were actually moving forward on a lot of stuff. But the key that I found was these enterprises. Okay, now for the community, I don't know whether I didn't know about it. I lived here for 18 years. I had no idea that Front Royal had enterprises.
Right.
You know what an enterprise is?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
Yes.
Well, good, Mike. You know what? You would be a good mayor.
Well, this is about you.
Well, anyway.
But it's just surprising. You grew up in this community and you really don't have a clue, how the water happens, electric works, what happens when you flush that handle. People don't really know these things. They've always been there and they've always worked. But it takes somebody to manage these facilities and these enterprises to make them work.
Yeah.
And they just don't happen by themselves.
Well, no, but I mean, it's really, Front Royal has 3, which is pretty remarkable, and their power is just unbelievable. The opportunity that we had going into this was tremendous, but nobody ever thought about it. And to give you an example, I was very fortunate that Joe Walsh, became a town manager after I left, he came from the private sector, and he worked for an electric company. In fact, he was well known for disaster. He got called in for disaster relief when hurricanes hit, and the power company would send him in and get everything set up. So he was very familiar with the structure of the power company. And at that time, again, my timing was impeccable. When I walked in, that's when Front Royal was going through that change where they had a 40-year contract.
Yes, I remember that.
And it went from 40 cents to like 80 cents, and everybody thought that half the town was going to go bankrupt because they had to double the prices. And but what they didn't realize, and with the help of Joe, we realized that we had something very unique, that we could negotiate some good prices and not do the easy thing, which is take a 40-year contract and run with it. And that's when we got involved with American Municipal Power, and became part of their 135 other municipalities, which then allowed us to join them to actually spend some money to become an own asset in hydroelectric and other type facilities, which allowed us then as owner to have long-term contracts at very low prices.
Move to the top of the line.
Oh, well, we did it. We actually did the last coal plant. And people give me a hard time now saying, Mike, you had the town invest in a coal plant. Well, you got to remember at the time, coal was still okay, but we were sitting that the facility was right on top of a coal mine. So there were virtually no transportation costs to get it out of the ground and get it to the facility, which then allowed us to lock in on some unbelievably low rates. And that's why I think when we left, we had the lowest rates of the entire state and so that allowed Front Royal to advertise that. So that was something else. But I was really pushing them, and because when you make money, that enterprise goes into a fund. I think it was referred to by one of the elected officials as a slush fund, which is not the truth. But this fund was created. Now that fund, you were allowed to get into it in emergencies, but it was really the purpose is to continue to build the infrastructure of that electric. And I was really pushing to automatic meter readers. I was trying to automate the system, and I think Joe tried to do it, and he had some limited success. But we could have taken the 11 or 12 million we had in there and automated the system, which made it more efficient and make more profitable for us. And that was what we were trying to do. Now, they have done a fairly good job, or had to do a job, with the water and sewer, because the state and the feds were forcing them to upgrade the water facility and also the sewer facility. So I wouldn't say it was the leadership of the community that was pushing that. It was that they were being pressured to do that, spend the money. But they had the money. So that's why it's very critical that you don't dive into that to supplement your governmental general fund.
Your general fund, right.
Right, you want to protect that. Now, it's there in an emergency, and it's very good. When I left, I had about 22 million in there. I don't know, Mike, you might know what the...
It's considerably less.
Okay. So I was always trying to say the town should be able to stand on its own 2 feet, and then have the enterprises gravy to provide the best services that a community could possibly have at the lowest possible rate. So that was the goal that we're going toward. And like I said, but that was almost a whole different mindset. I had Joe running the electric department, and I think I had Steve Burke actually doing the water, which he did a good job on the water side, with the plants and stuff. So we really had some really good guys running the facilities or department heads, and so we were clicking right in the worst recession since pandemic that we could go into. As I walked into the biggest hornet's nest I'd ever seen, the change happened when the council that brought me in decided that the town was in really good shape, and none of them ran, which opened up the door to allow individuals in that wasn't really happy with the things I was doing in the community. So that was kind of
things like that change. Well, we're almost in a similar situation now. We have this economic turndown that we're going through at the moment. So a new manager coming in now is going to be really faced with some challenges that you typically wouldn't you face. And you wonder, like, what in the world is he going to do? And he's going to be at the beginning of basically a new council. We're going to have 3 new council members and a new mayor coming up about the same time we have a new manager come on board.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
Because they can all learn together, but you have to make sure that you have a certain amount of institutional knowledge, or you'll fall back to doing business as usual.
Business as usual.
Now, what I found that when the recession hit me, I could not do business as usual, because I remember one time the council got together, and I didn't know whether they were kind of being smarties or not. They said, "Okay, Mr. Successful Businessman, you can't increase taxes and you can't reduce services. What are you going to do?" And I did the same thing you did. I went, yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, there's 3 things. There's revenue and expenses. I mean, there's 2 things really. There's not really much you can. You either increase revenue or reduce your expenses. That's the 2 choices you have in this world.
Yeah, and fortunately, that was what I come out. I mean, when you go into a company, that's the. I mean,
how much money do we have?
Yeah, how much? And I remember I was in a meeting and I had all these union guys yelling at me because I just laid off 30% of the workforce, and I finally had to tell them. I said, I'm protecting the 70% of people that are still here. Now, if things go well, and we can turn this around, then I can hire back the other 30%. But right now, if I don't do this, the 70% doesn't have a job.
Well, then you have 100% that doesn't have a job.
Yes. So all total, but I'm saying I'm looking at 70% of work, and I said, you 70% here won't have jobs. And it was almost the same thing, but I didn't have to be quite as coarse. I found that when I got here, like when I did the evaluation of assets, because that's the first thing you do, you got to evaluate your assets and see what you got. I realized that there was, over the years, that there were a lot of people that's probably assistants to assistants to assistants. In order to get raises, they had to promote them. And in actuality, there was a lot of, I wouldn't say it was a lot of fluff in there, but it was
top heavy.
It was quite a little top heavy. And what we were very fortunate, 2 things happened, which is really funny. I knew nothing about snow removal. I mean, snow removal.
You're in the South.
I'm South. I mean, and the first year I was there, I think Frontwell had the most snow in the last 100 years.
Right.
It was something like 78 inches. We had more snow that season than all of Buffalo, New York. Okay. And and all of a sudden here is this new guy that has no idea. I don't know the difference, but why do you have rubber blades on your plows versus not having them? Well, I learned that one real quick, because if you take the rubber blades off, you hit all the sewer tops, and you pull them out all over the place, all over town. So that was a quick lesson I learned very quickly. But what happened during that time, I had a lot of guys who were nearing retirement, and that last snowstorm put them over the edge. They said, "We're out of here." Okay, at the end of the year. So I was able to reduce some of the employees, situations like that, and a lot of the assistants to the assistants, they actually retired, which was good. Okay, and so I was able to skinny down the top on the top part of this, and I realized that the people I had in there could do the work. It was just over the years it had gotten kind of bloated. So we were able to reduce operating costs by, employees by 10-15%, which was without hurting anybody, or at least I tried not to hurt anybody. And so we were able to do that. And then finding this money and doing all these projects, there was money was already there. It was supposed to be used for that. Just for some reason, nobody did it. We were able to do a massive curb and guttering sidewalk program all over the community. So that kept them working. So we kept everybody working. So the services appeared to be improving even in these tough situations. And we never had any tax increases, so we were able to flatten it out. So from that aspect, I'm particularly proud, is because during this recession, we were able to keep things moving, and pull the town out of the, and build morale and everything else at the time for the community that I think we made it through it pretty well. Again, it took a supportive council that allowed me, at least the first 2 years, to allow me to do what I needed to do, which was the operation of the community and not the politics of it.
That's an important topic, because a new manager coming in is going to need that same thing, and not have a council that's going to micromanage the town manager. And that happens in the corporate world.
Okay.
We have had town managers in the past that micromanaged their staff, and in the end result, it works for a little bit, but you just run out of it. Just doesn't work in the long haul.
Look, Michael, I will go back and say again that it's a very complex job, and I got to tell you, the things that elected officials are dealing with now, like the complexity of the power, the negotiations we went in on long-term 40-year contracts, and building plants, and what kind of ownership, and I think we have 5 or 6% of some of these ownerships. The complexity on that was really, unbelievable. It took every bit of my experience to negotiate some of these things, these AMP deals and things. So the water complexity is, we only got a limited amount of resources out there. It's coming from the river, and just the thought process you have to know about projecting out what you think the community is going to need. And you can't do that unless you actually project out what you're going to need and have a plan of how much water you're going to need to be able to support the community you're in. Now, in Front Royal's case, we really don't have any very little industry as compared to other communities, which makes up a lot of their tax base. We have the 522 corridor, but a lot of that is still retail oriented, and you know how well retail's doing right now, big box type stuff. So there has to be a plan of how are you going to create jobs in this new economy and have them close where you don't have to travel so far, and create a quality of life that people can make some disposable incomes. My statement had always been that Main Street will never thrive unless the amount of disposable income that the citizens have here increases, that will allow the type of shops that will succeed down there to succeed. Because basically in Front Royal, I found, is you have a small group that just moves from restaurant to restaurant. Same amount. Let's say it's 50 or 100. I don't know what the number is. But once a new restaurant opens up, then they all kind of shift over to the new restaurant to see what that's like,
Leave the old one
and leave
behind.
the old one behind. So unless you have a vibrant population who has some disposable income to spend, it's going to be very hard to maintain an old style Main Street like we have here without doing some things. Now, locking it down on the weekends, I thought that was a fairly good idea if you can get people to come. But I think I was looking in your paper about the scenes from the Labor Day, right? I didn't see any people. I saw some pictures and I saw a couple of candidates, but other than that, I didn't see a lot of people walking around on the streets. I didn't see many people sitting outside in the restaurants. So you can do that, but you got to get people to come in there, and I think that takes a robust tourism and advertising and everything else and start promoting what our assets are in this community.
Right. We need an attraction, and if it happens to be restaurants, it's restaurants. The attractions can be a lot of things. I did speak to some people that were coming up from the city, on the weekends, but at the same time, they're being restricted. Even though we see a lot of cars on the road, they're not traveling with disposable income, so to speak.
Right.
And they're everybody's in the same boat as we
Yeah.
are. They're all trying to to make ends meet. But one thing that you mentioned was this economic growth really requires physical growth. I mean, in order to grow the economy, you have to grow the population, and it seems like there's requirements for that: schools, housing, jobs. All these things kind of meld together. But I think it involves down to some sort of vision or plan that, is the manager looking, how far out does the manager look compared to how far out should the council be looking? They should be looking out much farther than what the manager looks. A manager may take a 2, 3, 4, 5 year view, but the council needs to be taking 10, 20, 30, 50 year view of where our community is going to go. And I think we've lacked some of that in the past. We're so hung up on the day-to-day operations that we're forgetting that we need a path to get to where we want to go. Do you agree with that?
Well, I mean, what's that old saying? Failure to plan is planning to fail. When I came here, again, I was naive. I admit I was naive. I had no idea how mean and ugly people could get over the silliest of stuff, right?
It is surprising, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the second day I was here, one of the supervisors got with one of the former council members to have this little campaign that I didn't have any experience, so I was a bad choice. Second day, I mean, I don't even know these guys, and they're already spreading a rumor around. So that's kind of the things. But my main goal, not knowing anything and being relatively naive, is that you got to paint the house. I mean, the house looks like, good foundation, but from the street it looks terrible.
Curb appeal.
Yeah, I mean, it looks terrible. You go through our neighborhoods. And I said that the cheapest and the fastest thing I can do is put a new paint job on the town. Okay, so man, that's when we flew in, and we tried to paint everything. We tried to get everything up.
Get a lot of Band-Aids on there.
Well, I mean, some of them. They needed to be done. Some of them were good, but some of them were Band-Aids till I could get some money to do things.
Sure.
I mean, we should have on Commerce Avenue at one point, instead of doing the patching job, I should have just went on and paved it. But I didn't have enough money that year because I'd paved Royal Avenue all the way down. So I had to divvy out the money. But so, I mean, we were trying to make this place like you come here and you go, oh, this is the quaintest little town.
That's it.
And we were just starting to get some restaurants, and we had the 522 just starting to gear up, so we had a little bit of attraction. And I was really trying to, get our 7 centers of excellence. Why? Come to Front Royal. I took a lot of heat because I said we could be the Aspen of the East because of all the wineries. I said not grow big, but just be very quaint and nice. We can have economic growth and still maintain our small community environment. I mean, if we have a plan to tell us what we're going to work toward. Now, where I kind of went awry again of my naivety, I came into it thinking that the mayor was like the chairman of the board.
Yeah,
and
the big disappointment there.
And well, with Jim Easom, he did act like. I mean, I got to tell you, Jim was a pleasure to work with. He knew, because he was a business guy. He knew what had to be done. I always saw the council members as members of the board, and I was the chief executive officer of the community. Now, in my world, I had a board that wanted me to be successful.
Exactly. Because
Okay.
if you were successful, they were.
They were great. So, and at that time, I was doing exactly what the right thing to do. I was getting the stuff done. I was painting the town. I was fixing things. And so they were very happy, and they let me do that. Where they fell short a little bit is that they were so happy that everything was stabilized. They said, we've done our job. So the next group that came in, what all they needed to do was saying, this is where we want Front Royal to be. This is the vision that we want Front Royal to be like in the next 10 or 15 years. Let's work toward that. That didn't happen. Okay, they came in, got into the network, the nitty gritty. Now, what was interesting when I came in, that particular council had every council member actually sign saying that they would not interfere with my operational side. Either I did operational, they would not interfere. Now, what they were trying to do is keep the manager from feeling the pressure that he had to do favors to a councilman or they would vote against him, which was going on a lot during that time. So in essence, what happened was they gave me the authority that if somebody wanted a pothole filled for so-and-so, and I didn't have to feel uncomfortable by saying, no, I'll get to it, but I can't do it tomorrow. That would give me the freedom and the power to do that. After these guys left, the next council came in, wouldn't sign it. So what happened was then they constantly were. I had to, you almost had to. These people want favors, and if you didn't give them favors, then they would give you bad reviews. I mean, it just kind of fell apart, and that's why I said it was so difficult with the town manager. With most of the councilmen, if they don't know what's going on and they don't take the time to learn the bigger issues of what their job is for future policy, where we're going, and get into the operational side,
Right.
but that's comfortable for them because they can do something. But it takes a lot of work to find out this other stuff. That's why I'm so key on this election coming up, is that I'm a good-looking guy. I have a great personality. I want to know exactly what are their plans, which tells me they actually did the research, and it's not a popularity contest. It's actually somebody who's going to get in there and actually do something. In turn, if they come in prepared and knowledgeable, then that will make the job of the town manager 1,000% easier, because now he will have clear direction what he needs to do to get to where he needs to go. And so I hope on this election that will happen, that they can find a good quality guy with good people skills and without the fear of having to do special favors for the council members because they're scared they're going to get fired.
So let's go back to some of the applicants we have. Do you think they need to be, even if they're from a smaller town than Front Royal, could they be successful? If they're younger, could they be successful? Or do we need really someone that's been in larger cities? I always look at, if they're in a big city now, why would they want to step? To me, that would look like a demotion, but not necessarily. But what do we really? How much experience do we really need? I mean, we know it's difficult. So, somebody that's been in a lot of different positions, like tourism and economic development, and a town manager or assistant town manager. Do you think those are the kind of things that qualify?
Well,
I mean, our charter says solely on education and experience. So how do we quantify that, so to speak,
all right, look, Mike, and this is just my personal, because I come from a corporate background that dabbled into this and then got out about as fast as I could get to. So I'm not that brave, or I would have continued in this line of work, but I wasn't, my heart wasn't in it anywhere other than Front Royal, okay?
Exactly.
I did it because I grew up here. I mean, I got offers all over the place for other towns and cities and things like that, but that was not why I took the job. I mean, now I'm back in the corporate, which I'm very happy with. The problem that you got now, because as of the last recession was very unique, this is very unique because now nothing's going back to normal. See, back then I knew that within 4 years we could get back to what I call normal.
Right,
okay?
what we did before.
We've always done it before. This one, you're not going back to normal. And so what happens is as I look for what I'm doing, I'm going against the conventional wisdom of the time, because now we're at a point where we're looking at everything. It's everything that the institutions that were put in place back after World War II to help the world now is no longer sufficient to do it. The way we finance things, the way healthcare, school, I mean everything, these old systems are not working anymore. At the time when we built all these schools here in Warren County, I mean, it was not a bad thing because we waited so long. But then what happened was things changed. There might be this new wave that we don't send kids to school anymore. And now we have big buildings that we built that's not going to be used anymore. And it's not their fault. They were dealing with what they had at the time. It seemed like a good idea. Now things are changing.
We need to think about, maybe that goes back to the future and the vision. Are we going to be able to adapt to this new normal? Is somebody going to be able to think farther ahead, thinking how are we going to embrace this in order to be profitable for our community?
You're right. Well, that goes back to answer your question. See, I think right now what we need people, young people, younger people, because they're going to take over, and we don't have much more time left, Mike. I mean,
I've done my 3 score and 10.
Yeah,
we're on borrowed time.
Yeah, I'm ready for the new generation to take over, to be honest with you, because even I think of myself as being progressive, but nowhere near as progressive that we're going to have to be to deal with this new norm. I think what we need to do is get some young people with different thought processes. I think we need to elect some people that are young thinkers. Now, you can be older, but you got to be a young thinker. You can't go in as business as usual anymore. You got to challenge everything that we did. Is it still worthwhile to do it? And is there a better way of doing it? And at some point, there were some municipalities that when I came in, 12, 13, 14 years ago, that were actually looking to go to virtual communities, where they outsourced everything, okay? Now, if you look at that, it's mixed reviews on that, okay? I still like to talk to people. I still, you can't completely separate yourself.
Right.
And when you outsource, there are issues about quality that's going to get done. So I think it's going to be a blend of outsourcing and regular way of doing business, but there's not going to be the same way of doing it in the old days. So I think you need council people of different ethnics. I mean, we have a very diversified community now. We should have more diversity in our elected officials. You need people who are thinking out of the box. And you need a young person that can actually have that energy to say, well, I don't know if I can do it, but I can do this. Let's try this. And then you have a council which is now ready to be thinking positively ahead and not negatively back to the way things were. Right. And so that's what I think what's exciting about this election, because I think we have enough candidates. But I don't know what their platform is. I mean, I have no idea if any of them if they know what an enterprise is, and you know what that means. I don't know whether they even know. I don't know whether they even know how much is in the enterprise funds and what's happened over the last 2-3 years. I don't know whether they even have a clue on power and what's going to happen with the green sustainable. I mean, one of the things I'm most proud of, I did start the solar movement on this, and AMP did come in and work with Joe, and we're one of the few communities that have a solar farm. I mean,
most people don't even know that.
Well, no, I mean, it's quite remarkable. Their electric bills would be a lot more if you didn't have that out there producing power in peak times to reduce, what the cost is. I mean, there are so many things that we can do in Front Royal if you get the right leadership and the right team in there about power and our water. I mean, we could actually be one of the first communities. I was looking at a closed loop system. Sometimes it might be cheaper to have a closed loop system than it would be to put it back into the river. Once you get that water, coming in, you just keep recycling it backwards and forwards. I mean, that's what a lot of I build power plants now, and power and desalination plants, and we're looking at closed loop systems for our power plants where you just keep using the same water converted to steam. Steam pushes the turbines. It turns back into water, recycled all over again. So we're using no groundwater, and so these are the things that I think that our community, because we're small enough and we can move fairly quickly because we don't have this huge infrastructure that we have to, huge compared to other places. I think we could actually be a model of smaller communities should follow us. Now, that's a vision. We want to be, a completely sustainable and community. And this means recycling and all the other stuff. But we were looking at the cost of recycling. I mean, we almost got rid of that.
Sure.
So these are a lot of the things that I think, to answer your question, can you hire a young person in this position? I said, absolutely. But as long as you give them the leadway to do and take some risks and do things that are as good for all the community, not just for a small group of people who benefit financially from controlling all the aspects of the community.
You're right. And I think it's so important to think about this vision. We use that word a lot, vision statements.
Right.
But I can remember as a child that when John F. Kennedy gave that statement that we're going to the moon in 10 years. But the major part of that vision was and return safely. That was going is one thing.
Right.
We're going to go, and it was almost 10 years to the date that we sent a man to the moon and return safely. Because that was the complete vision. It's one thing just to have an idea,
right,
but to have the process to get there and back. And I think that's what we need when we're going forward. And then one of the things I've always said is, I like to use the word championing and supporting and the positivity, because attitude is what changes the community. Presidents come and go, but what changes in your daily life, regardless of what party wins or not, the next day you get up and you have breakfast, you go to school, and you go to work. You really don't see a major change at a local level. But what you do see is people's attitudes change. Exactly. And I think that's what we need. We need to be able to promote this community involvement, like with the community garden. I know you're
Yeah.
behind the scenes involved quite heavily. I've seen Mike down there digging the post holes.
No,
and
I'm only a worker bee there. I take directions
That's
very
right,
well
you are
from.
voluntold.
Yes, I only do what Fern and Betty tell me to do, and
But you're involved, and I think that's what we need in this community. And more people are involved. We just don't know about it. And we need, sometimes people say, well, what do you want me to do? They need a little help and prodded maybe to guide them, find something that fits their goals. So I think that's going to be an important thing for our community going forward, is to involve more of our community instead of just coming here, going to bed, getting up and driving back to the city. That's got to be, I think that's a long-term goal that we need to change, saying, when you come here, you can stay here. And I say, it's a great place. You mentioned one thing, and what are the three top things in real estate? Location, location, location. And we have that. We have the resources and the natural beauty. We have the proximity to major markets on the East Coast. We have, 80% of the population is east of the Mississippi, and you can ship UPS in 2 days anywhere on the East Coast. And we have a UPS terminal here. I mean, we have a lot of things going for.
oh, Mike,
for
we
things.
have some.
And people don't appreciate it, I don't think.
Well, I'll tell you one story, which is funny. The Chamber of Commerce had me talk a lot about why living in Front Royal is good. So we had a big community meeting, and I think we filled up the county building, and I was telling them about our 7 centers of excellence and how this is. And I said, well, I was doing the same thing. This job is very critical based on the people and their attitudes that people don't realize. And I said, does anybody remember what happened February 16th, and that was 2008 or whatever, 2000. And every one of them said, yes, that's when, for the first time in the history of Front Royal, we had a complete shutdown of the grid. Okay, and I asked them, and actually that day we had 18 water main breaks because we had the snow, and then it dropped down to 0, and then I think every pipe in the whole town broke down or busted that day, right, at 0 degrees, and then the power outage. So, and I remember it distinctly, is because I hadn't been on the job but 4 months, and I remember I looked at my clock and it was 5:45. It stopped, and I talked to Joe. I said, Joe, what the hell happened? He goes, we had a power outage. I said, well, what happened? I mean, how
Turn it back on.
Yeah, how many times that happened? He goes, never happened before. We have no idea how long it's going to take to boot back up. And I said, you don't have any idea? He goes, no, it's never happened before because you just can't flip switches.
No.
You gotta flip them and let them wait, and then you got to go. And we had like 24 switches, and each one of them took, he thought, 4 hours before you. So we're figuring out, my God, we got people on oxygen and everything else. What do we normally do? He goes, we don't. Here I am.
I don't know.
I have no idea. So I'm calling, and then I call the fire department. And I said, do you have? I had 2 places. I had the hospital that had backup generators, and we had the other place. So I'm saying the fire station. So I said, okay, can we set up a shelter? Because when it's 0, people got no heat, and most of the heat in Front Royal is electric heat. So I'm saying we got to have some place for the elderly to go. So I called Doug Stanley at the time and I said, look, can we coordinate this? And we had that all coordinated and everything else. I tell you that story because out of that audience, everybody remembered that day. And I said, why do you remember it? He says, our kids couldn't watch TV. Now, they could do without the water.
Exactly.
They could do, but man, when that electricity went
now it's
down-
the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, when the internet goes down, the whole world stops.
Yeah.
And with our schools, they've had some glitches. So you're right.
Yeah,
When my office internet goes down for a day, I might as well go home because there's no phone, there's no internet, business stops.
So I mean, that was back 12, 14 years ago. Now, we do not understand or appreciate the basic things that a community is supposed to run on, and I think we've moved away from that. For all this partisan politics stuff, I think for local, like in towns in Front Royal like this, you stick to the local issues, you stick to the services and the quality of services, and you stick to that. All this other stuff, I think, leave it for the state or the Fed or the national, but for local quality of life, you need to focus on local issues on this, and whether it be water or power. I really, even to this day, I think that just with our electricity and figuring out some other ways that we can probably lower our electric costs. Because I know right now it's starting to go up, and I haven't followed it.
And we've had a few volunteer days that says, please reduce your power consumption because we only have so much.
Well, I haven't been in front of the council for 12 years, or 10 years, I guess, 4 years. For 10 years, so I just stayed out of it. But I think I'm going to show back up because I've noticed there are several citizens that have talked to the council about having these reverse meters because you can have some solar. So that would help out during these tough times to have people supplying fat power back. And we've had lip service now about 2 or 3 times. This happened last year, came up again, I think, this year. And, oh, yeah, we're on that. Yeah, we're going to do that. And then Joe left. And then we've gotten lip service from a lot of the people in power now. So I might go back and say, hey, look, it's time. If we're having brownouts, and now let's look into the reverse meters and having solar because that's kind of thinking that I'm thinking about. That would help a lot of
If
people.
only 1 or 2 people do it, you might not see an impact. But if you have hundreds of people doing it, then you're going to see an impact in it.
Oh, yeah, and if you look at Germany and some other countries, Germany, of all places, is equivalent to Alaska, as far as, where
Right,
they
you don't
position.
realize that, do you?
And most of their power, you go to Germany and everybody has solar on their roof, either for hot water or a little bit more expanded. But they integrate that. I mean, and even in our community, maybe we should build houses that automatically integrate some solar in there, just like air conditioning was integrated years and years ago into a building of a home, or power windows in a car. Maybe it should be just automatic. And maybe the town passes an ordinance that if you want to build, you have to build these natural type of power generation systems into it, or you won't get a building permit. I don't want everybody calling me
You're
up
not
now
advocating
and
that,
advocating that. I'm just saying these are things that I think are progressive.
Or there's incentives for having you do that.
Yeah. Right now, there is so much technology that hasn't been applied because we're stuck in this old way of thinking.
That's right.
And again, this is kind of a long-winded answer to your question. And I say progressive not as left or right. I'm talking about different ways of thinking. Forward thinking. All right, forward thinking in this changing world, because I tell you what, Mike, it's coming whether we like it or not. And we'll either get left behind or we can be the leaders. And that's really where I think the community has to decide. And because of the position of Front Royal, we can be leaders. So close to Washington. I mean, look at the housing prices. Housing prices are going up like crazy now because everybody wants to get out of the city.
We don't have any, it's right.
Yeah, it's not enough demand out there now. I mean, we have
Well, there's plenty of demand, but not enough source.
yeah. Supply, I should
Supply,
say.
excuse me,
The
yeah.
demand is there, supply, because this new shift is shifting out that now you can, as long as you got good internet, I can work out of the house
Right,
now.
right. And if we want some of those informational technology type jobs, we have to provide the amenities and the housing for people like that to relocate here. I mean, that's something to think about. I know quite a few people are working from home.
Yeah.
And then you hear it in the news every day. In New York City, they have a 31% exodus
Yeah.
already, and things have not.
Well, they're
really-
begging them to come back. Please come back, because they're
Exactly.
losing all that
Yeah,
revenue.
but they're also looking and say, well, maybe we don't need to have such a much space downtown New York when we can hire people that live there in Connecticut. Now they're saying, you know what? We don't have to have them live in Connecticut. We can have them live in Arkansas or Arizona or Oklahoma. Or all of a sudden now we've lowered our cost of doing business, and we're still getting done what we need to get done. So I mean, my son works at a computer company in St. Louis. He hasn't been to the office since March.
Yeah.
And he's working every day and keeping the computers going around St. Louis. So
My daughter
can do it. I mean-
my daughters came in from San Francisco and stayed a month with us. And
worked every day.
yeah, I mean, she the only problem is she goes, I'm paying for my place.
Right, exactly.
But I mean,
That's going to change.
well, what's funny is that I said her timing was excellent, because if you notice all the wildfires, if you've seen San Francisco, you can't. I mean, it looks like it's foggy, but it's smoggy with all that smoke and stuff. And it's really terrible there. And I said, well, you got out at the right time, because you can't even go outside in San Francisco now. The wildfires are so bad. And so, but her business hasn't stopped. She works every day on the internet and everything else. So look, there is a change coming, Mike, and that's why I am so encouraging for the community to pick some good leaders that have a vision for the community, not because I believe in this or I support gun control. That has nothing to do with what we got right now. What we got right now is how can we build the quality of our community and our lives here on a local level, and let's focus on those issues and not let people take advantage of us, like putting in 125 rental apartments out in 522 and not even knowing the impact of the water if we had enough water to do that. The reduction of the tap fees. Now, I agree there should be some reduction in the tap fees in some areas, okay? But we ran into that without being prepared or even understanding. I
When
mean,
you talk about revenue, we're gonna lose revenue, and how are we gonna break it? And if you can't raise taxes, how are you gonna raise revenue?
yeah, and we actually lowered taxes, which, I mean, I'm all for not paying taxes, but not in the middle of a pandemic where I don't want to raise taxes. Why don't we just run the operation efficiently,
Right.
and bring in industry to pay the taxes? Now, as an individual resident, I do not want to pay. I want to pay as little taxes as I have to, okay? But in industry, that's on the revenue, the only place you're going to get it is you got to have the business.
You gotta have the business.
Yeah.
Well, let's tell you what, you've given us a wealth of information, and I know you have a wealth of knowledge in your experience, and hopefully you'll become more involved in our community going forward and help this new council and to maybe see some of this forward thinking. And if people don't speak up, it doesn't happen. So I think it sets a good example. So let's leave it there.
Okay.
I think we'll cut this off, and maybe we'll do a part 2 as it gets closer to the election. We'll see how things evolve and who is kind of stepping forward with their message, and see how things go like that.
Well, I noticed that Josh had a great video. I mean, he hit on a lot of the good stuff. Being a pilot, I thought was a good thing. I mean, look, you got to know what you're doing. You can't go flying without knowing where you're going.
Plan.
You got to have a plan, and I like that. I don't know what his plan is, and I mean, it's easy to say that you need a plan, but
Right.
let's hear a little bit of it. And most of the people, you don't have to be right on your plan. You just got to show you're thinking about it, that you have a basic understanding
Sure.
of enterprises and budgets and the challenges facing the community, and what are some of the positive solutions that we have to get through it. I think mudslinging or calling people names, that doesn't cut
It
it.
doesn't happen.
And so let's really, whether you're endorsed by the Republican Party or not, I want to hear what the plan is. What is your solution to a lot of the big issues that I'm worried about moving forward in the town of Front Royal?
Well, you need confidence in your candidates that they're going to do what they say they're going to
Yeah.
do.
I mean, once they get elected, I'll support whoever is elected, as long as they do what they say they're going to do. That I see it. But if it falls into this bickering and nastiness that I see now going on,
Right.
disrespect and
This
everything
negative campaigning has got to stop. I mean,
Yeah.
and I see that all the time where it's always about what the other person did, not about what I'm going to do. And
Right.
I want to hear more what you're going to do. Like you said,
Right.
tell me your plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. You listen. It's good to listen, but okay, all right. I just told you something. Now,
What are you going to do with it?
what are you gonna do with it? Okay.
Well, I tell you what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to tell you right now. Since this is an election time, we have invited, and we will be inviting, all our candidates to come to the Royal Examiner, and Mr. Graham here is going to have a conversation with each candidate. And I think with your experience as being a town manager and your political involvement, neutrality. Well, we hope that you'll be able to draw out some of these plans, focus on what our candidates will be bringing towards to our community, and to be able to give the voters a sense of some knowledge that they can select the best people they feel that will
Yeah.
bring the community forward. So we have 3 individuals running for mayor. We have 8 individuals running for town council. Mike has his work cut out for him. So we'll be announcing those interviews. We're going to invite everyone, whether they're endorsed or not.
Yeah.
And we'll see if they come, and let everybody know that Mike will be speaking with him. I know we're going to be getting all sorts of negative comments about having you do this, but hey, we're going to do something, and we're trying to put a positive spin, and we want to get a good result out of doing these interviews. And I think that you will pull out some information. It's not going to be an attack interview about what you did, what you didn't do, but about what you're going to do and what your qualifications.
We want forward thinking, and here's my commitment to your audience. I'll be fair and balanced. We're going to send out about 20 issues that we have now identified over the last 2-3 years we have to face. My plan is to have candidates pick out 5 that they think is important on the first round, and let them get prepared and think about it. I don't want anybody to look bad on these
No,
things.
we're not going to attack somebody.
No, we're not going to attack anybody. Just pick out the 5 you think, because these are real issues. These are not sit-up issues or anything else. This is like
And
water.
they're not national issues.
They're not. Every one of them is a local issue, and then what's your position on it? It tells what you're going to do, and then hopefully, like in October, we can come back again, and then hit the other 5.
Right.
And so now everybody, for the first time that since I've been around, that the citizens will, if they watch this, will find a lot more information. I remember the last couple debates, which weren't really debates from the Chamber of Commerce. There was no issues that were even addressed. So now what I think is that the citizens will be able to see exactly where each one of these individuals stand on some solutions that really affect me from a day-to-day basis. Yeah, I'll be fair and balanced. They'll have the questions in advance. They can answer them anyway. I mean, I'll let them talk, and then we'll see how it stacks up.
You'll have more than 3 minutes.
Well, I mean, I understand that, brevity is good, and, solutions have simple, some solutions have some simple solutions, some problems have simple solutions to go along with it. But, I mean, you gotta know what you're talking about a little bit. You gotta do the homework. And just basic stuff. Get the budget. See what's happened in the last 3 years. Look at the enterprise. How much are we taking in and out of this? What are we doing about certain key issues? We got rid of the tourism department. We have nothing in its place. I mean, these are all things that okay, it was done. I made decisions that probably wasn't good. I mean, my greatest one was I turned Cloud Street into a one-way street in the wrong direction.
But you fixed it.
Man, I stood in front of everybody and I said, "Look, I made a mistake. I wasn't looking at it or paying much attention, and they did it. And the next day we had it reverse going the other way." And so
that's what you do.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is human, and we're going to make mistakes, but we got to have a positive, like you said, we got to have a positive attitude on what's the potential of the community, not what it used to be.
Exactly.
Where are we going forward? Let's go forward.
Going forward.
All right.
Well, Michael, I really appreciate you coming in today. I know it has been we spent quite a bit of time, but I think if people are engaged in our community and really want to know what's going on, you need to take the time and watch these long conversations. I think you glean
It's
a
for
lot
their
of
own benefit. That's going to affect their lives. And I know people are busy. I know they're just trying to survive. And you really got to have confidence in the people who are leading you, because you just don't have time to do it.
Well, I'm all about surviving, but I want to thrive.
Thrive.
And that's
Thrive.
That's the positive message we want to get out to our community.
We can thrive.
That's right. Appreciate it again. Thanks so much, and we will be seeing you in the next few days.
Okay, I got to put on my mask before I leave.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you.